Well, hello, and it's time for another Thursday Thoughts, and this one's entitled Awakening. Have you ever been awakened from a deep, dreamy sleep and found yourself completely disoriented? When I was on my first overnight on the USS Nimitz, an aircraft carrier, and we were in some intense training operations in the Caribbean, and there were flights going on all night long, and I was trying to sleep, and my bunk room was right underneath the flight deck. And as a result, there was this pounding and crashing that was happening right on the overhead of the room of the space I was sleeping in. I was so tired, however, that I got to sleep. And what I was dreaming of was a series of car crashes that I was somehow involved in. And then I awoke, and it was disorienting. Sometimes I feel that way when I read news postings and watch what's happening in our culture. And I think the contrast between now and when I grew up, I feel that kind of confusion. What's changed? Is it just me becoming older and more nostalgic and less critical of those times? I'm sure there's some of that happening, but I also think there are some disorienting realities about the transformation of the culture around us. The changes were already underway during my childhood. C.S. Lewis, in fact, addressed the heart of these changes in a 1947 book that he wrote, very short one, but very powerfully written, called The Abolition of Man. It confronts the growing trend that he saw in education designed to replace any objective moral content, originating from outside the individual, in other words, with subjective amoral feelings as the arbiters of value. He argues that true humanity has a design that we call the image of God, which includes a higher conscience than personal feelings and preferences. And he is not specifically limiting this to the Judeo-Christian concept of philosophy, but he refers to kernels of common truth across the spectrum of major civilizations regarding these basic ethics, and he calls them the Tao. And these include telling the truth, commitment to spouse, children, and family, caring for the poor and oppressed, refraining from deception, refraining from false testimony, refraining from cruelty, refraining from the taking of life. And the key concept in his argument is that there is a higher accountability beyond humanity to whom we are accountable, who has established these moral expectations. The humanists and their humanist manifesto in 3 parts lay out their aim to produce good without a God. This was published in the 1930s, and their 8th article says this. Says, religious humanism considers the complete realization of human personality to be the end of man's life and seeks its development and fulfillment in the here and now. In other words, there's no eternal accountability. There is no sense in which we should be aiming for that. The 13th article, for instance, says, religious humanism maintains that all associations and institutions exist for the fulfillment of human life. And that term fulfillment is loaded with all kinds of individual expectations, not necessarily common good or a higher good beyond humanity. Ultimately, this philosophy has been widely adopted, even those who don't recognize it as humanism, and it makes humanity the measure of all ethics. Specifically, it denies any creator or any higher authority to whom mankind is accountable. The aims of this movement, seen in their initial stages by C.S. Lewis, are in full flower in our contemporary culture. One of the consequences is the need for a ruling body that Lewis refers to as conditioners, to arbitrate and to shape the preferences and the motivations of the multitudes of individual final authorities who see themselves as the only true authority. Now, this extreme autonomy, or self-law, leads inevitably to either no authority, anarchy, or a powerful, centralized, ruling group of these conditioners who arbitrate the chaos to suit their own subjective ideas of what is most valuable and right. What are we to do as followers of Jesus? Well, first, I would say don't panic. As scary as all this sounds, God remains sovereign. The followers of Jesus throughout the ages have fulfilled their calling to build his kingdom and pass the torch of his love and his grace to the next generation. They have done this on every continent and under all forms of government. We've been blessed to live in a country where freedom to do this has been protected. I pray that this will continue, but I'm also confident that as Jesus promised, the gates of hell will not prevail against the movement of his followers, the church. Our calling remains the same. Love God, love our neighbor, proclaim the good news of his love, speak the truth in love, and make disciples who will continue to pass the torch in our homes and in our community of faith. This weekend, we will study Mary's anointing of Jesus, the ultimate worshiper. And we will share the Lord's Supper and wearing of masks for the first time since COVID began will not be required during the sermon as we are seated in a distanced way. So I'm looking forward to seeing you either online or in person this weekend. God bless.